Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson. Joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Daniel Hodgson. On this day, 110 years ago, the First World War began. The War of 1914 to 1918 was to become the largest and most costly conflict the world had known. The Great War involved the mobilisation of 70 million men in uniform worldwide. They fought in a global conflict that drew in over 100 countries, caused the disintegration of old empires, and reshaped the political order for much of the 20th century. Over 13 million people died, 9 million of them combatants. Over 1/3 of all the soldiers killed were missing or had no known grave. Many millions more were maimed physically or damaged mentally, adding to the enormous cost to all nations involved. 417,000 Australian men enlisted during the war, amounting to almost half the eligible male population of the country, and over 330,000 of them embarked for service overseas. Almost 2/3 of those who served abroad became casualties, the Australian Imperial Force having the highest proportion of battle casualties of all the forces of the British Empire. Over 60,000, or 1 man in 5 of those who served abroad, died on active service. Of the 264,000 who returned, more than half had suffered through their wounds, both physical and emotional. For Australia, the effects of the war were profound and enduring. Today, we warmly welcome Group Captain Ernie Walsh, President of the ACT Division of the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Arthur Edward Carl Gepp. Arthur Gepp was born on the 25th of November 1896 in Adelaide, South Australia. He was the only son of hotel keeper Henry Gepp and his wife Marie. Arthur was educated at Pulteney Street School and later at Prince Alfred College, where he was a keen student, particularly of German and chemistry. On his 16th birthday, Alfred sat the entrance exam for the Royal Military College, Duntroon. He came first in South Australia and second overall in the Commonwealth, winning a scholarship to start officer training. Gepp entered Duntroon, here in the Federal Capital Territory, in March 1913. He was less than 18 months into his training when the First World War broke out in August 1914. At the end of June the following year, Gepp and his classmates were graduated early to allow them to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. Gepp received a commission as second lieutenant and returned to South Australia, where he was assigned to Bravo Company of the 32nd Battalion. He embarked with the rest of his unit in November 1915, sailing from Adelaide on the troop ship Geelong. Gepp and his comrades arrived at Suez in December. By this stage of the war, Allied forces had abandoned the ill-fated Gallipoli campaign. As a result, Gepp's unit remained in camp, where they continued training to fight on the Western Front. In February 1916, Gepp was transferred to the 28th Battalion and was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He and his men embarked for France the following month and arrived in the French city of Marseille on the 21st of March. From there, the 28th Battalion was immediately sent north to the French and Belgian border, where they were billeted behind the lines. They entered the trenches for the first time in early April. They rotated in and out of the front lines, as well as training in the rear areas, before being sent south to the Somme in July 1916. Here, the men of the 28th Battalion were drawn into the fighting to capture the high ground surrounding the village of Pozières. Their first advance took place in the early hours of the morning on the 28th of July, when they attacked German trenches north of Pozières. The fighting was horrendous, and hundreds of men quickly became casualties. They were withdrawn from the front lines the following day, having gained very little ground at a cost of more than 500 casualties. Gepp and his men were only given a short respite from the fighting and returned to the trenches on the 4th of August to make a second attack on the positions they had failed to capture in July. They immediately came under heavy shelling and machine gun fire, which cut down men in waves. Private Herbert Harris described the battle. Imagine men dug in a few feet into the ground and shells falling just like rain. Trenches blown up and men digging for dear life to rebuild them, or rescuing their comrades who were buried, and in most cases, the rescuers were also buried by shells. When entering the trenches, we were bombarded with tear and gas shells, which made us wear our gas helmets. It is almost impossible to see and hard to breathe. I've heard officers and men say that the landing and the Lone Pine battle at Gallipoli were a picnic compared to this last fight. On this occasion, Gepp and his men reached the German trenches and held them, but were subjected to heavy shelling. It was during this period that Lieutenant Gepp was hit by shrapnel and killed. His men buried him where he fell, but were forced to continue fighting. Afterwards, Gepp's final resting place could not be located. The German trenches were captured the following day, on the 6th of August, 1916. Their success cost the 28th Battalion alone more than 200 casualties. After his death, Gepp's parents paid tribute to their son with a poem placed in the Adelaide newspaper. No one knows the silent heartache. Only those can tell who have lost their best and dearest without a last farewell. Today, Lieutenant Arthur Gepp is commemorated among the missing on the Australian Memorial at Villa Bretonneux. He was just 19 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Arthur Edward Carl Gepp, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.